Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliyana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, as peace talks between Russia and Ukraine fail to progress, rising casualties have led to a large swathe of Western companies abandoning the Russian market. Our business correspondent Simon Pusey and senior British diplomat Timothy Morris will be joining me here in the studio for their assessment on the most recent developments. And as Ukraine once again attempts to open humanitarian aid corridors, which would allow tens of thousands of civilians the opportunity to flee in safety, I'll be speaking with Katerina Gabrielova, the head of communication and advocacy at People in Need, a charity based in the Czech Republic capital city of Prague. She'll be updating me on the growing humanitarian disaster on the ground. Then later, Simon Dixon, the CEO of banktothefuture.com, will be joining me from the Isle of Man for some insights on how Bitcoin has come to the rescue for those seeking alternative financial support during this conflict. But first, let's start the show by looking at how the war is being played out on social media platforms. On the business and employment-focused platform LinkedIn, the CEO of Heineken, Dolf van der Brink, has announced that the firm will stop production and sales of Heineken beer in Russia. The statement goes on to say that the Dutch brewing company will take immediate steps to ring-fence their Russian business to stop the flow of monies, royalties and dividends out of the country. On Twitter, there was this post by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who spoke about her phone call with Canada's President Justin Trudeau, who she describes as a friend. She says the pair discussed the EU's path to independence from Russian oil, gas and coal. And then this devastating post on Facebook, posted by the Ukraine Foreign Embassy. This gentleman pictured lost his wife, daughter, two son-in-laws and his mother-in-law during an airstrike in the Kiev region. Back to here in the UK, the British government's response to Ukrainian refugees has been met with widespread condemnation. As the invasion began, European Union countries swiftly agreed that all Ukrainians could enter without visas and could live, work and receive welfare for at least a year. In contrast, the British government's response has been described as cold.
No Home Secretary can take these decisions lightly, and I'm in daily contact with the intelligence and security agencies who are providing me with regular threat assessments. What happened in Salisbury showed what Putin is willing to do on our soil. It also demonstrated that a small number of people with evil intentions can wreak havoc on our streets. This morning, I received assurances which enable me to announce changes to the Ukrainian family scheme.
But why has it taken so long when she's had intelligence for weeks, if not months, that she needed to prepare for a Russian invasion of Ukraine? And why still, if we've still got to wait until Tuesday for this new system to come in, what is to happen for everybody else in the meantime? Why is she not bringing in the armed forces? They've offered to help. We've had 1,000 troops on standby to provide humanitarian help for 2 weeks. So why not use them now to set up the emergency centres and to get people passported through as rapidly as possible and get them into the country?
Yeah. Well, earlier I spoke with our business correspondent Simon Pusey for some analysis. Simon, just give us an update on what the UK have been up to this week.
Yeah, so Britain and Boris Johnson very keen to emphasise the role they're playing in terms of trying to help Ukraine and help refugees. But they have faced criticism, the government, for not letting enough refugees in, especially when you compare it to countries right next to Ukraine, like Poland, that have taken over 1 million people. There's been 2 million refugees so far, and that number is growing all the time as Russian forces push into Ukraine. And just today, after this criticism, I think in a few days, only 50 applicants had actually been allowed through the visa process from thousands and thousands of people who are trying. So a lot of criticism to the government over that, and Priti Patel has just said that they will not have to visit a visa application centre now. They can do it online, which is what a lot of people are calling for, to cut the red tape and let it be easier for Ukrainians to enter the UK. So I think we'll expect to see those numbers increase rapidly now from 50 a couple of days ago to sort of thousands, hopefully in the coming days. And refugees have been such a big part of this story because, of course, so many people are fleeing Ukraine, and it's, where are they going to go? And this has been the biggest refugee crisis, I think, in Europe since
2.4 million at the moment.
Since World War II, yeah. New stories, obviously, this story is changing all the time. Roman Abramovich, very famous here, of course, for owning Chelsea Football Club, supposedly good friends with Putin over the years. He's one of 7 new Russian oligarchs who've been sanctioned, and that has consequences for Chelsea. It means that they can't sell any more merchandise. He's not allowed to take any money out of the club now. And of course, he was trying to sell the club, probably because he knew these sanctions were on the way, but he hasn't managed to do that now. And so that means he cannot now sell it unless those rules change. It also has consequences for Chelsea themselves in terms of the tickets they can sell. I think season ticket holders can continue to go to the games, but they can't sell any new tickets. And there's also a cap on the amount of money that they can spend to send their team away to away matches, which I think is capped at £20,000. So lots of consequences there. And then, of course, President Zelenskyy earlier in the week addressed the UK Parliament. There was a big standing ovation, of course, both before and after his speech, and lots of Churchillian references to "we will fight them on the beaches." He said, "We will not give up and we will not lose. We will fight to the end at sea and the air. We will continue fighting for our land. Whatever the cost, we will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets." So, lots of sort of similarities to Churchill's famous speech there. And I think, UK Parliament standing to applaud him. And I mean, he's really the figurehead of this war. People, really respecting him and how he's come out and done this in comparison, I think, a lot of the time to President Putin, who's often seen at the end of a massive table. Zelensky's out there, very good at getting his message across.
He's been quite critical, hasn't he, of the government, the British government?
Yeah, I think he has, and I think he's been critical of NATO as well. He obviously wants to close airspace over Ukraine, which would stop Russian planes from coming in and bombing, but obviously the consequences there mean that pretty much NATO is joining the war, and then that's a whole different story. So I think he's obviously calling for more help, and the UK and other NATO allies have been sending help. They've been sending ground-to-air missiles to stop missiles or anti-missile machines, but obviously he wants more help because he knows he cannot take on the Russian army and win. The best he can do, and the best Ukraine can do, is what they're currently doing at the moment, which is halting their progress, especially towards the capital, Kyiv. But he obviously wants all the help he can get, and I think that speech that he gave will do him no harm at all, because he does come across as so personable and actually quite inspiring when he makes speeches like that.
Absolutely, a true leader. Thank you, Simon. Well, for more on the British and international response, I was earlier joined in the studio by Timothy Morris, a senior British diplomat who has served as British ambassador to Morocco, Mauritania and South Sudan. Timothy Morris, thank you so much for joining me in the studio once again. Firstly, I would like just your broad assessment, please, of what's been taking place in Ukraine over the past couple of weeks. And also, I do want to tap into your African expertise, because there has been a confusion over the reaction, apart from, of course, the outrage about how our students were treated in the first few days, but just...
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Juliyana. And I would very much like to talk about Ukraine. And what I hope I bring to it is also some background in dealing with the Russians, as well as a diplomat, and being familiar with their modus operandi as they present themselves. It's a terrible moment. It's an absolute blatant aggression by Russia, by the Russian regime and leadership on a neighbor. It's a classic of illegality. It's directed at civilians. There are some extremely concerning reports about already what is happening with attacks on hospitals and apartment buildings, but also what might happen in future as well. There's been an international reaction which we can castigate ourselves about. We can say that we were late, that we should have sent stronger signals earlier, but nonetheless, none of that excuses the actions which were taken. I would say that in the United Nations, unsurprisingly, the Security Council cannot take action because, of course, Russia have the veto. There's been the General Assembly vote. There's been a very welcome degree of solidarity around the world for Ukraine.
Has there?
Well, I think there has, in initial reactions from Africa, the African Union and the African Union chair, made a very strong statement initially. It was disappointing, certainly to my former colleagues, to our country, that some African countries abstained on really a very straightforward resolution. And I'm very well aware that that has created some pushback in the public space.
Where do you think that's come from? That
I think possibly there's a quasi-historical reaction dating back perhaps to the Cold War and before the Cold War, of somehow either not wanting to take sides in between the West and the former communist bloc.
fear too?
Possibly some equities involved, but that show is over. This is a country, Russia, which has contributed nothing effectively to Africa, except something rather sinister in recent years in the form of
Arms.
Mercenaries. Arms, but mercenaries, particularly the Wagner group. But I don't detect any exercise in actually reaching out and assisting the development of Africa, for example. When we look at the other Cold War partner, China, nobody can doubt the enormous contribution China have made to the development of Africa, whatever debates we may have about it.
Of course, I think a lot of our viewers will agree with you. There was a kind of a silence at the start, but nevertheless, I think Nigeria have spoken out against what's happening. You mentioned illegalities, and got to bring you to what happened overnight, the Mariupol hospital, maternity hospital, children underneath the rubble. It's been described as a new low, although there are new lows emerging every day. Armed Forces Minister James Heappey was speaking on Sky News earlier, and he says that Russian military commanders and other individuals, I presume Putin and the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, will one day be held to account for their actions. Do you think this is likely?
Yes, just one word on the new low idea. I think we should remind ourselves this is actually standard operating procedure for the Putin regime. This is what they've done in Chechnya. This is what they've done in Syria. The killing of civilians and the terror, the deliberate targeting of vulnerable people is what they do. It's remarkable in this case by its flagrancy and also its visibility as well. And one thing that Putin and his regime are unable to cope with are the way that these pictures go around the world immediately. They've always
there's new laws now in the country.
This always happens in war, where there are distressing situations and situations where mistakes are made. But there's no escape really from the image of this war, this aggression. In terms of international justice, of course, a practical point is that Russia are not signatories to the International Criminal Court. So as long as they protect and shield the guilty people or those who should be put on trial, it will be very difficult to get hold of those individuals unless they travel to countries who are signatories. But in realistic terms, this will require some major change of the regime in Russia. But they absolutely do need to answer for these crimes. Exactly who it is, well, it's clearly President Putin. There's always the question of junior commanders and whether those are the right people to go for. But this is absolutely a straightforward case. I would just add that in terms of protecting guilty people, whoever they might be, Russia has a long record in that. Our country was attacked, as you know, in Salisbury, by some intelligence members who were filmed and absolutely caught red-handed doing this. They have been protected by the regime, and it was quite clear that they were acting under instructions to attack not only a former intelligence officer of theirs, but indiscriminately at unfortunate people in what is my hometown, actually.
Oh, goodness me. Seasoned British diplomat Timothy Morris, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. We are, of course, staying with the fast-evolving geopolitical and socio-economic fallout of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to the United Nations, nearly 3 million Ukrainians have fled the country since the start of the war, with most people entering Poland. Authorities and volunteers across Central and Eastern Europe have spent the past 2 weeks scrambling to provide food, accommodation and medical aid to the many thousands of desperate people crossing into their borders. For more on the escalating humanitarian crisis, I'm now being joined by Katerina Gabrielova, the head of communication and advocacy at People in Need, a charity based in the Czech Republic capital city of Prague. Katerina Gabrielova, thank you so much for joining me today on Channels Business Global. I know you're exceptionally busy. I also want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing. Just so our viewers can have some insight, can you just give us an idea of the scale of the humanitarian crisis that your agency and other agencies are having to deal with on the ground?
Yes, thank you for having me. Of course, as you probably, when you follow the situation is absolutely horrific. We have been working in Ukraine since 2014, mainly in the eastern areas where many people are now flooding to the west. We had to close down our Kiev office, and now we set up a temporary office in Lviv, where many people are fleeing right now because it seems to be a little bit safer area. But there's like currently way too many displaced people within the Ukraine. And also, like many people, as you know, are leaving the country to the neighboring countries. So basically, we concentrate on both these groups. Immediately after the Russian invasion, we started to deliver mostly humanitarian goods to Ukraine. We sent like 5 trucks and followed with humanitarian trains full of basically life-saving humanitarian goods, meaning, like these people, they don't have water, they don't have food. So we're supplying them with that, also with like basic hygiene kits. As you know, many people fled home, so they have no place to stay. And so we're providing them with sleeping bags, with like sleeping mattresses, trying to organize, places where they could stay. And also, we are supporting them around the borders where they're, like with Slovakia, for example. So, it's still winter, so it's quite cold weather as well. So we are trying to set up like a heating tents where people can at least warm up a little bit. Also, again, providing them with different kind of humanitarian goods. And as you can imagine, many people are very traumatized. So we are trying to support them with psychological support as well. Because if you imagine like those people spend days under tremendous shelling. And there are a lot of kids leaving and mothers and families. So we are trying to secure all of this. And also, as I said, we are sending trains to Ukraine and back. We are trying to bring people. And of course, give them support here in the Czech Republic as well. We kind of like give them information what they're supposed to do. We have many organizations working with refugees right in the Czech Republic, so they can provide them with the information, papers they need, direct them basically when they can live and so on.
Goodness me, it's such an overwhelming crisis, and I take my hats off to you because it's a lot. And you mentioned the mental health and the trauma, and I've got to ask about the mental health and trauma of people that are working within your agency, because we've seen these humanitarian corridors and we've seen ceasefires being called. It doesn't appear as if Russia is sticking to the rules, and we saw that, of course, overnight with the bombing of the Mariupol maternity hospital. But are you concerned about these corridors? You mentioned your truck drivers are going in. Is it safe for aid agency workers at the moment?
Well, it's, of course, we are in the war, so it's never like safe enough. But currently, it seems to be there are no major obstacles to deliver humanitarian assistance to people. And hopefully it stays like this.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, Katerina, what the most urgent need is now and how the international community, perhaps our viewers, can help. I'm sure you saw the outcry. There are thousands of Nigerian students in Ukraine. I've been to Prague. Thousands of Nigerians live there too. So everybody is concerned and glued to our TV screens. What can we do to help? Because sometimes I think the British government, Brits have raised over £100 million. They've asked people not to send clothes. Yes, people need clothes, but it's not necessarily the most urgent need. What is your most urgent need right now?
Yes, exactly. We, as well as a people in need, we open a public appeal basically to collect money. And I think this is the best way for now, because, then we can really use this money for what people are needing right now. And as I said, what they need the most is now basically water, food, shelter, warm places to stay, and psychological support. We also are basically working with NGOs in Ukraine, local NGOs, where we basically transfer some funds as well that they can help right in the field. Also giving these grants out to, other NGOs we work with, either in the Czech Republic or in the neighboring countries. And for now, because the situation is very critical and we still don't know what will be the needs further. So there's really no need for people collecting clothes and, other items that all these NGOs working not ask for, because I think it complicates the work a little bit more because we are in the field trying to monitor the situation and trying to really respond to needs of people.
Goodness me, we do thank the Lord for people like you, Katerina Gabrielova, Head of Communication and Advocacy at People in Need. Please do keep talking to the African channels. We desperately want to help and do anything we can. So we will have you on again. Thank you so much, Katerina.
Thank you for having me.
Let's change gears slightly. On Wednesday night, US President Joe Biden issued an executive order to ensure responsible development of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. This marks the first time the world's largest economy has made a move to regulate cryptocurrency, and comes at a time when the digital currency sector is being heavily relied upon by both sides caught up in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Simon Dixon, the CEO of banktothefuture.com. Simon joins me from the Isle of Man. Simon Dixon, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So in the first 7 days of this invasion of Ukraine, more than 100,000 people sent $60 million worth of Bitcoin, Ethereum and other digital currencies to assist, of course, with relief efforts. So what do you think is the importance of this?
Well, I think people are starting to learn that the speed and efficiency of being able to get money where you want it to go. Not so long ago, we saw a lot of censorship in Canada when people were trying to protest against certain, political aspects. But now the money from cryptocurrency is people directing their money where they want it to go without the inefficiencies of lots of intermediaries in the middle, is getting the help where it needs at the fastest pace possible, and really money being reflected and going where society wants it to go.
Absolutely. I think Nigeria also saw its own case of that during some End SARS protests just over a year ago now. But there are some concerns because, of course, we know, we've all been following the news very carefully, that there are so many sanctions on Russia. But, of course, Russians have also been dipping into Bitcoin. Do you think we should be concerned that perhaps, even though everybody can access cryptocurrency, so can bad actors too?
Yeah, and Bitcoin has this happy medium whereby, although you can transact in real time, you create an immutable record of your transaction on a blockchain, which everyone can see. So what we've seen is that when criminals and bad actors use Bitcoin, eventually, if they can connect, you're allowed to do it anonymously, but if they connect your transaction to your identity, then you've created an immutable record of your crime. So any oligarchs or bad players that are using Bitcoin right now, you'll be able to go back into those records and figure out who were the good people doing it, who were the bad people doing it. So it creates that happy medium where innocent people in Russia that are being really crippled financially through no fault of their own, other than their politicians and leaders making decisions that they may not have any decision or influence over, are able to transact. And those that are actually using Bitcoin for illicit activities will create those immutable records that can be used by law enforcement in the future in order to target those that are using it for bad means.
Simon Dixon, CEO and co-founder of Bank to the Future, thank you so much for your insights. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But before we go, here are once again some poignant images that have emerged during this week. As always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions, and I will see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.